We are going to talk about completing the square to put the equation of a circle that is written in general form into standard form. So standard form was the equation that we had studied in the previous lesson. So you can see here, general form is you have a collection of x variables and a collection of y variables not put in x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared form, which is standard form. So we begin by talking about what it means to complete the square. So completing the square, when we learned it in Algebra 1, was to get a perfect square trinomial. So for example, let's say you had ax squared plus bx being x squared plus 4x. And then the question is, what do I add to that trinomial so that it completes it as a perfect square trinomial? The goal is that eventually, if I were to factor this, I would get x plus 2 quantity squared. Okay, so if I were to multiply this out, x plus 2 squared is x plus 2 times x plus 2. Or in other words, that value that you need right there would be positive 4. There's a relationship that I don't want to yet tell you guys until we go through this a little bit more to see if you guys can figure out what the pattern is. So if I wanted x squared plus 6x and to make that a perfect square trinomial so that I can factor that trinomial to be x plus something squared times x plus something squared, what would the value be here? Okay, so I will do one more with you guys. It would be plus 9 because then x plus 3 times x plus 3 is x squared plus 6x plus 9. So this process of adding the 9 or the c value is you're completing it so that it's a perfect square trinomial. So we can factor it to be that. Okay, so maybe you picked up on the pattern already. What is the number that we would add to this binomial to get a perfect square trinomial? So if we work backwards here, looking at the previous pattern, you see that 9 and 3 are related in the sense that the square root of 9 is 3. Also, half of 6 is also 3. So the question is, can you think of, go ahead and hit pause. What number would I add here so that I can complete the square here? So hopefully you said 49. Okay, and so if I were to take half of 14 and square it, I would get 49. Okay, so in completing the square, what we are able to do is to use the pattern here, and if I wanted to come up with the c value that I would add, I would take half of b and I would square it. So half of 14 is 7, 7 squared is that 49 value. So let's try one more. What would it be if I had x squared plus 10x? So good if you said 25. Half of 10 is 5. 5 squared is 25. So plus 25, in which case when I factor it, I have x plus 5 times x plus 5 is x squared plus 10x plus 25, or x plus 5 quantity squared. So let's go ahead and go up. So the whole point of going through that process was so that we can complete the square on the x variables and the y variables. So the b value for x that we see here is negative 6. So what value is it that I could add to that expression so that I complete the square for the x's? Well, half of negative 6 is negative 3. Squared is positive 9. There was already a plus there, so let me get rid of that plus. Okay, so same thing here. Half of 4 is 2. 2 squared is positive 4. What you'll notice is that each time you take half of a number, whether it's positive or negative, and then square it, that the values that you add are always going to be positive. So now if we finish off the problem here, so it's plus 9 plus 4 here. This is a scale though, in which case I'll erase this in a minute. But you have that this side of the scale must be, this side of the scale must be equivalent to this side of the scale. So if I've added a quantity of 9, on the left side, I have to add a quantity of 9 on the right to even it out. If I add a quantity of 4, I'm going to have to add a quantity of 4 to the other side. So essentially, I've added 13 on both sides. Now this is going to allow me to factor that to be x minus 3 quantity squared, and the y's to be y plus 2 quantity squared. If I add all these together, I get 25. And so the form that I get is now, this is called standard form. And I'm able to find out things like the center of the circle is 3, negative 2. Opposite of negative 3, opposite of positive 2. The radius is 5. Okay, so example 2, I'm going to go ahead and do that as one more example for you. Okay, so if it's not arranged to where the x squareds are on one side, so you see how x squared and 10x are on different sides, I'm going to go ahead and subtract 10x on both sides to bring 10x to the other side. It's written right here for us. And then y squared is here, and then 8y is on the other side. So we're going to go ahead and subtract 8y. Here's that expression. And then your constant's going to go over on the right-hand side of the equation. So since it's positive 32, I'm going to subtract 32 to the other side. Now we're ready to complete the square. So the x's first. If I take half of negative 10, I get negative 5. Square that, I get positive 25. If I take half of negative 8 and square that, I get negative 4 squared, which is positive 16. What I add to the left side, I'm also going to add to the right side. This is ready to be factored. It's x minus 5, and you might have noticed that this value here is always half of the b value, so negative 10 divided by 2 is negative 5. So what would that be for y? Well, half of negative 8 is negative 4 squared. And so on this side, we're adding 41 to 32 to get negative 32 to get positive 9. So the center of my circle is positive 5. Positive 4, always the opposite in sign. The radius is the square root of 9, so 3. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll down past these examples and look at the next page to see. Let's go ahead and put all of the problems together in 2A. Okay, on this one, they're asking me to graph the equation of that circle. So the first thing is rearrange everything. When I rearrange everything, I'm going to leave a spot open after bx to complete the square. Looks like everything's in the right spot for me to go ahead and do that. And then it helps to put the double underline so that you know you have to add the same amount to both sides. So we'll begin with the x. I'm going to take half of negative 4, square that. So negative 2 squared is positive 4. I'm going to take half of 8 is 4. And then square that is positive 16. What I add to the left, I'm going to go ahead and add also to the right. And get that this is now factorable to be x minus 2 squared. This is factorable to be y plus 4. Remember that amount that you have right here is half of the b value. And then over on this side, 20 minus 11 is 9. So the center of this circle is 2 comma negative 4. The radius is 3. So 2 negative 4, I can plot to be down here, and radius equals 3. So up, down, from the center, 3. Right, left, from the center, 3. I went one too many over. Okay, and then draw your best circle that goes through those 4